The security guard's hand trembled as he watched the surveillance screen. Something was wrong. Very wrong. It was 2:47 in the morning at Balmoral Castle, and Michael Chen had been working royal protection for 11 years. He'd seen photographers hiding in bushes. He'd caught tourists climbing fences, but he'd never seen this. 3 figures. Moving through the North Woods. No cameras. No phones. Just purpose. Michael's throat tightened. He reached for the radio, then stopped. Protocol said to verify first. But every instinct in his body screamed danger. The figures were heading toward the private wing, toward where Prince Charles and Prince William were staying. Michael had a choice to make, and he had seconds to make it. 20 feet away in the ornate residence, Charles couldn't sleep. The moonlight cut through the heavy curtains, painting silver lines across the Persian carpet. He stood by the window, a glass of water in his hand, thinking about his mother, about duty, about the weight of a crown that hadn't yet touched his head but already pressed down on his shoulders. He didn't know that outside in the darkness someone was coming for him. William was awake too, 1 floor above. His newborn son had just fallen back asleep after an hour of crying. Kate slept beside him, exhausted. William watched his child, breathe, feeling that fierce, terrifying love that only parents know. The love that makes you understand you would die without hesitation to protect this tiny life. He had no idea that tonight he might have to prove it. Back in the security room, Michael made his decision. He pressed the emergency alert. Silent. No alarms. No panic. Just a red light that would flash on every guard's device across the estate. The response had to be invisible, because if these intruders knew they'd been spotted, everything could go wrong very quickly. 6 guards began moving through the castle, silent as ghosts. They wore soft-soled shoes. They communicated through earpieces with clicks, not words. They'd trained for this scenario 100 times, but training and reality are different things. Michael zoomed in on the surveillance feed. The 3 figures had stopped. One of them was pointing directly at the window where Charles stood, backlit by the lamp in his room. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. They knew exactly where the prince was. This wasn't random. This was planned. Charles set down his water glass. Something had caught his attention. A movement in the trees, maybe. Or perhaps just a feeling. That ancient human instinct that whispers, danger. He stepped closer to the window. Michael watched the screen and whispered into his radio, "Do not let him open that window. Do not let him go outside." But Charles was already reaching for the latch. If you're wondering what happens next, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this unfolds. This story gets intense. The head of security, James Morrison, was already running. He'd been asleep in his quarters when the alert came through. He didn't bother with his jacket, didn't waste time tying his shoes properly, just ran. He'd protected the royal family for 19 years. He'd taken a bullet in Iraq before that. He knew what real danger looked like, and this was real danger. James burst into the security room. "Talk to me." Michael didn't look away from the screens. 3 hostiles, north approach. They've stopped at the tree line, watching the prince's window. Weapons, can't confirm. But they're not tourists, James. James grabbed the radio. His voice was calm, steady. The voice of a man who'd learned to control fear. All units. Threat level red. Protect the principles. Knock down protocol. Now, in the castle, guards were already moving into position. To outside Charles's door. To outside William's. For more creating a perimeter in the hallways. But the 3 figures outside weren't moving forward. Anymore, they were waiting for something. And that's what terrified Michael most. Because patient predators are the most dangerous kind. Charles heard the soft knock. 3 taps. The code his security used when something was wrong, but they didn't want to alarm him. He crossed the room and opened the door. 2 guards stood there. Their faces were calm, but their eyes told a different story. "Your Royal Highness," the first guard said quietly. "We need you to step away from the windows and move to the interior room. Just a precaution." Charles had been in the public eye for over 5 decades. He knew when people were lying to protect him. "What's happened?" "Possible security concerns, sir? Please." Charles didn't argue. He'd learned long ago that his security team didn't wake him at 3 in the morning over nothing. He followed them. Down the corridor, his bare feet silent on the cold stone floor. Upstairs, William was already being moved. Kate held their sleeping baby, confusion and fear mixing on her face. "William, what's going on?" "I don't know," he said, but his voice had that edge, that military training kicking in. He'd served in the Royal Air Force. He'd flown search and rescue missions. He knew danger when it was close. A guard appeared at his door. "Sir, your father is being secured. We're bringing you both to the safe room." William's jaw tightened. "All of us." "Yes, sir." That's when William understood. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a false alarm. Whatever was happening outside in those woods was real enough to break protocol. Real enough to put the future king and the current heir in the same protected space, something his security would normally never do. In the security room, Michael watched the three figures. They still hadn't moved. "James, they're just standing there." James studied the screen, his mind racing through possibilities. They're waiting for something. Signal, maybe. Or he stopped. His blood went cold. "How many cameras do we have on the south perimeter?" "South." "We're watching north. How many?" Michael's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the south feeds. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. Just empty grounds. Peaceful darkness. Then Michael saw it. Oh, God. 2 more figures, coming from the opposite direction. Moving fast now. Heading straight for the main entrance. It was a diversion. The 3 in the north woods were meant to draw their attention. The real attack was coming from the south. James grabbed his radio. "South entrance. 2 hostiles inbound. Move, move, move." But it was too late. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the castle's east wing. They were inside. Charles heard it. Even from the interior corridor, the sound reached him. He stopped walking. That was glass. The guards didn't answer. They moved faster, their hands on their weapons now. William heard it too. He pulled Kate closer, shielding both her and the baby with his body. Every instinct told him to fight, to protect. But he had a newborn in his arms and a wife who needed him calm. "Stay with me," he whispered to Kate. "Whatever happens, stay with me." The guard leading them spoke into his radio. "Breach confirmed. Moving principals to safe room. ETA, 90 seconds. 90 seconds. A minute and a half. It sounded like nothing. But when danger is inside your home, every second stretches into eternity. James was running again. He had 6 guards between the intruders and the royal family. 6 highly trained professionals against an unknown number of threats. The math wasn't in their favor. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with the team escorting Charles. "Keep moving," he told them. Then he looked at Charles, really looked at him. "Sir, I need you to trust us." Charles met his eyes. In that moment, there was no prince and no guard. Just 2 men facing danger together. "I do," Charles said simply. James nodded and continued past them, toward the sound of breaking glass. Michael's voice crackled in his earpiece. "James, the 3 in the north woods are moving now. They're coming toward the castle. 5 intruders, maybe more they hadn't spotted." James did the calculation in his head. If they'd gotten this far, they had a plan. They had resources. They had information about the castle's layout. This wasn't random. Someone had given them inside knowledge, which meant someone had betrayed them. James reached the east wing. 2 of his guards were already there, weapons drawn, facing a shattered window. The curtains moved in the cold night breeze. But there was no one there. "Where are they?" James demanded. "They went into the servants' corridor," one guard said. "Thompson and Rodriguez went after them." James's stomach dropped. The servants' corridor. It connected to every major room in the castle, including the path to the safe room. They weren't trying to escape. They were hunting, and they knew exactly where their prey was going. Thompson had been a royal guard for 7 years. He'd protected diplomats in Afghanistan. He'd stood post in London during terrorist threats. But he'd never felt fear like this. The servants' corridor was narrow, dark, built centuries. a go for staff to move unseen through the castle. Now he moved through it, weapon raised, listening for any sound. Behind him, Rodriguez breathed quietly, steady. They'd trained together, trusted each other with their lives. Thompson's radio crackled. "Thompson, abort. Return to principles." "That's an order." But Thompson saw something. A shadow moving ahead. He raised his fist, signaling Rodriguez to stop. The shadow moved again, human-shaped, deliberate. Thompson made a choice. He ignored the order. He moved forward. It was the last decision he ever made. The attack came from behind, not ahead. A third intruder they hadn't seen, hidden in an alcove. Rodriguez tried to turn, tried to shout a warning. But a hand clamped over his mouth. Both guards went down, silent, efficient, professional, in the security room. Michael watched their camera feeds go black. "James, we just lost Thompson and Rodriguez." James felt his heart stop. Lost. That word meant so many things. None of them good. Lost how? Cameras cut. No radio response. James forced himself to think, to push past the fear. 2 guards down. 5 intruders, maybe more. And the royal family was 60 seconds from the safe room. 60 seconds that suddenly felt impossible. All units converge on the safe room corridor. Double security on the principals. Now. Charles was moving faster now. The guards had stopped being polite. They were practically pushing him, urgency overriding protocol. He could hear the tension in their breathing, could feel the shift in the air. Something had changed. Something bad? "What's happening?" he asked again. The guard didn't look at him. "Sir, please, just keep moving." Ahead, Charles saw William. His son was holding his grandson, with Kate beside him, and 4 guards surrounding them. Their eyes met across the corridor. Father and son, different generations, different relationships with duty and crown. But in that moment, they understood each other perfectly. They were both terrified, not for themselves, but for the people they loved. William shifted his son in his arms, making sure the baby was secure. The child slept on, unaware that danger was hunting them through the ancient halls of their own home. Kate's hand found William's arm. "Is he safe? Is our baby safe?" William wanted to say yes, wanted to promise her that nothing would touch their child. But he'd been in enough real situations to know you never make promises you can't keep. "We're going to be fine," he said instead. "Just stay close." James reached the corridor intersection. He had 8 guards with him now. 8 professionals between the royal family and whatever was coming through those servants' passages. He positioned them carefully. For at each end of the corridor, a human wall, a last defense. "Hold this position," he ordered. "Nothing gets through. Nothing." The guards nodded. They understood. This was why they'd trained. Why they'd taken this job? To stand between danger and the people they'd sworn to protect, even if it cost them everything. Charles and William reached the safe room door. Reinforced steel, biometric locks, communications equipment, food and water for 72 hours. Built after 9/11s, when the world realized that even royals weren't immune to modern threats. The door opened. The guards began ushering them inside. That's when they heard it. Running footsteps. Fast. Coming from the servants' corridor, James spun toward the sound, weapon raised. His guards did the same. 8 fingers on 8 triggers. The footsteps grew louder, closer. James's radio crackled. Michael's voice, urgent. "James, I've got movement on thermal. For signatures. 20 meters from your position in closing. 4, not 5. Which meant one was somewhere else. Doing something else. James made a decision. Get them in the safe room. Seal it. Do it now. But Charles didn't move. He stood in the doorway, watching his security team prepare to face unknown danger. "You're not coming with us? Sir, please, you're staying out here." Charles's voice was quiet, firm. The voice of a man who'd spent his life understanding what duty meant. "You're staying out here to protect us." "Yes, sir." Charles looked at his guards. At James. At the men and women who'd chosen to stand between his family and harm. He wanted to say something. Thank you seemed inadequate. Be careful seemed pointless, so he just nodded. A small gesture. But James understood it. William was already inside the safe room, Kate and the baby secured. He looked back at his father, still standing in the doorway. Dad, come on. Charles stepped inside. The door began to close. Heavy. Final. Sealing them in. Sealing the guards out. The last thing Charles saw was James's face. Calm. Professional. Ready. The door locked with a heavy clunk. Inside the safe room, silence. Outside, the sound of running footsteps stopped. James faced the servants' corridor entrance. 4 shapes emerged from the darkness. But they weren't attacking. They were Thompson and Rodriguez. And 2 castle staff members, running, terrified. What? James started. It's a decoy, Thompson gasped. The attack? It's a decoy. James felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean, decoy? The break-in. The movement. They wanted us to seal the royals in the safe room. Rodriguez was breathing hard, a bruise already forming on his jaw. Because that's where they planted the real threat. And then James understood. The inside information, the perfect timing, the careful planning. Someone hadn't betrayed them by helping intruders break in. Someone had betrayed them by being inside all along. Asterisk, inside the safe room. Charles felt something was wrong before anyone spoke. That instinct again. The one that had kept the royal family alive through centuries of threats. William felt it too. He was pacing, his son still in his arms. This doesn't make sense. What doesn't? Kate asked. Breaking glass? Running footsteps. It's too obvious. William had flown missions over hostile territory. He knew what real operations looked like. They wanted us to hear them. They wanted us to run here. Charles moved to the communication panel. Then we need to tell security. He reached for the button. His finger stopped an inch away. On the panel's surface, barely visible in the low light, was a wire. A thin copper wire that wasn't supposed to be there. Don't touch anything, Charles said quietly. William saw it too. He turned slowly, scanning the room with new eyes. Looking for what didn't belong. For what had been changed. Kate held their baby tighter. William, what is it? Someone's been in here. His voice was steady, but his hand shook slightly. Someone modified this room. Outside, James was already at the safe room door, his hands on the biometric scanner. But Thompson grabbed his arm. Wait, if I'm right, if they wanted the family sealed in there, then opening this door might what? James demanded. Might trigger whatever they planted. James looked at the door. Steel, impenetrable, designed to keep threats out. But if the threat was already inside, it became something else entirely. A cage. Michael's voice came through the radio. James, I've been reviewing security footage from the last 72 hours. Someone accessed the safe room 2 nights ago. 2:15 a.m., using maintenance credentials. Who? Still checking, but Michael's voice caught. James, they were in there for 40 minutes. That's not normal maintenance. Plenty of time to plant something. To modify systems. To turn a safe room into a trap. James pressed his face close to the door's communication panel. Your Royal Highness, can you hear me? Inside, Charles heard the voice, muffled, distorted through the thick steel, but audible. We hear you. Do not touch any of the room's systems. Do you understand? Don't touch anything electronic. William and Charles exchanged looks. The wire. The modifications. It was all connected. We understand, Charles said. We've already seen something. A wire on the communication panel. James felt his stomach drop. Can you describe it? Copper, thin, running from the panel into the wall? Michael was typing frantically in the security room. Running diagnostics on the safe room systems now? He stopped. Oh no. Talk to me, Michael. The environmental controls. Someone's modified them. There's a trigger connected to, his voice went quiet. James, if they seal that door from the inside, or if someone tries to override the lock from outside, it activates something in the ventilation system.
Oh.
James understood immediately. Poison gas. Biological agent. Chemical weapon. The specifics didn't matter. The result would be the same. The royal family sealed in a room they couldn't escape, breathing in their own death. Can you disable it? James asked. Not remotely. Someone would have to physically access the system. From inside the room, inside the safe room, Charles was already moving. He'd heard enough through the door to understand what was happening. William, help me with this panel? William handed his son to Kate. Dad, if we're wrong, if we're right, and do nothing, we die anyway. Charles's hands were steady as he examined the panel. 76 years of life. Of duty. Of carrying weight that would crush most men. It had prepared him for this moment. He began carefully removing the panel's cover. His fingers worked slowly, precisely. One wrong move could trigger whatever had been planted. William stood beside him. Father and son. Working together. For years, their relationship had been complicated. Duty and love tangled together. Expectations and reality pulling them in different directions. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, they were just two men trying to protect their family. Charles exposed the wiring there. A small device. Military grade, connected to the ventilation system with 3 separate wires. Red, blue, and green. James Charles spoke clearly toward the door. We've found a device. 3 wires. Tell me how to disable it. Outside, James was already on the phone with the bomb disposal unit. But they were 20 minutes away. 20 minutes was forever. Michael pulled up everything he could find. Schematics, bomb databases, anything that might help. It's a timer trigger, he said. The device won't activate until specific conditions are met. Either the door sealing protocol is completed, or someone tries to force the door from outside, or he went pale. Or after a specific amount of time passes. How much time? Based on the wiring configuration, I'd estimate. Michael checked his watch. Calculated. Maybe 5. For minutes. 240 seconds. Not enough time for bomb disposal. Not enough time for careful planning. Just enough time for a choice. Charles looked at the 3 wires. Red, blue, green. Like something from a movie. Except movies didn't show you how your hands shake. Didn't show you how your mouth goes dry. Didn't show you how you think about your mother, your sons, your grandchildren, your whole life. In the space between one heartbeat and the next. Dad. William's voice was quiet. Let me know. I've had military training. I've dealt with your son is in this room. Charles looked at William. Really looked at him. If something goes wrong, he needs his father. That's not negotiable. William wanted to argue. Wanted to pull rank. Wanted to do something other than stand there and watch his father risk everything. But Charles was right. The baby needed him. Kate needed him. And sometimes, love means letting someone else be brave. Charles knelt before the device. His knees hurt, arthritis, age catching up with him in 1,000 small ways. But his hands were steady. Outside, Michael was reading everything he could find. The red wire is power. The blue wire connects to the timer. The green wire connects to the ventilation system. Which one do I cut? Charles asked. Silence. The kind of silence that means nobody knows the answer. The kind of silence that precedes disaster. Michael, James's voice was hard. Which wire? I don't know. The configuration doesn't match anything in our database. It's custom. Which means cutting the wrong wire could what? Could trigger immediate release. Could kill them in seconds. Charles looked at the 3 wires. Red, blue, green. 3 chances. 1 wrong move. He thought about his mother. The Queen, she'd faced danger too. Different dangers. Different times. But always with the same quiet courage that defined their family. He thought about William, about watching his son grow from a boy who'd lost his mother too, young into a man who'd found love and purpose. He thought about his grandson, sleeping peacefully in Kate's arms, unaware that his entire life, his entire future, hung on which wire his grandfather chose. 2 minutes, Michael said quietly. Charles reached for the wire cutters that were part of the safe room's emergency toolkit, designed for cutting through obstacles, escaping debris. Not for this. Never for this. Dad? Wait. William crouched beside him. Look at the device again. Really look at it. Charles did, and then he saw it. Something he'd missed. A tiny scratch on the casing. No, not a scratch. A mark, deliberate. Someone had carved a symbol into the metal. A crown. Someone left us a message, William said. Or a clue, Charles added. He traced the crown with his finger. It pointed toward the green wire. Could be a trap, William said. Whoever planted this could have left that mark to make us cut the wrong wire. Or someone else found the device first. Someone who couldn't remove it without triggering it. So they left us a way out. Charles met his son's eyes. We have to choose. 90 seconds, Michael's voice through the door. Kate was crying silently now, holding their baby, trying to be strong, trying not to break. Outside, James had his hand on the door handle. His team was ready to breach, to rush in, to do something, anything. But he knew that opening the door might kill them all. Thompson stood beside him. If this goes wrong, it won't, James said, with more confidence than he felt. But if it does, you tell their families that we tried. You tell them nothing's going wrong, James insisted. But his hand on the door handle was shaking inside. Charles positioned the wire cutters around the green wire. If I'm wrong, he said to William, take care of your brother. Take care of your family. Be the king you were meant to be. You're not wrong, William said. But his voice cracked on the last word. 60 seconds. Charles looked at Kate, at his grandson, at William. He'd lived 76 years, had seen and done so much, had made mistakes, had tried his best, had carried the weight of expectation every single day. And now it came down to this. One wire, one choice. He squeezed the cutters. The green wire began to bend under the pressure. Just a little more force, just a little more on the wire snapped. A tiny sound, like a whisper. For one horrible moment, nothing happened. The device just sat there, silent, waiting. Did it work? Kate whispered. Charles stared at the device. At the small screen on its face, the countdown had stopped, frozen at 41 seconds. But the ventilation system hadn't activated. No gas, no poison, nothing. It worked. Charles breathed. It actually worked. William grabbed his father, pulled him into a hug. A real hug. The kind they hadn't shared in years. The kind that said everything words couldn't. Outside, James heard the sound of crying, relief, joy, life. He pressed the intercom. Your Royal Highness? We're safe, Charles said. His voice was shaking now. Now that it was over, now that the adrenaline was fading, the device is disabled. James closed his eyes, let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. Thank God. Michael was already on the phone with the bomb unit. Get here now. We need that device removed and analyzed. And someone find out who accessed that room 2 nights ago. I want names. I want answers. But even as the immediate danger passed, everyone knew the truth. Someone had tried to kill the royal family. Someone with access. With knowledge. With resources, and they were still out there. James opened the safe room door carefully, slowly, even with the device disabled. Wasn't taking chances. The door swung open, and there they were. Charles, William, Kate, the baby. All alive. All safe. Charles stepped out first. He looked at James, at his team, at the men and women who'd been ready to die for them. Thank you, he said simply. James nodded. Words seemed inadequate. But then they always were. William emerged, still holding his son. The baby was awake now, looking around with those wide, curious eyes that babies have, unaware of how close he'd come to never having a life, never growing up, never becoming whoever he was meant to be. Kate was crying openly now. Relief and fear and gratitude all mixed together as they walked back through the corridor. Surrounded by guards, Charles and William walked side by side, not ahead and behind, not separated by protocol and position, side by side. "You were right about the mark," William said quietly. "You were right," Charles corrected. "We figured it out together." And in that moment, something shifted between them. Years of distance, of formality, of duty creating walls. All of it cracked. Not breaking completely, but cracked enough that light could get through. Danger had threatened them, but it had also united them, though neither of them knew that the real threat was just beginning. 3 days later, Michael sat in an interrogation room, staring at a photograph. The person who'd accessed the safe room at 2:15 a.m. using maintenance credentials, person he'd worked with for 6 years, trusted, shared coffee breaks with Sarah Mitchell, junior security technician. 28 years old, daughter of a retired police officer. No criminal record. No red flags. Nothing that would have made anyone suspicious, except she'd disappeared the night of the attack. Walked off her shift at 11 p.m. and never came back. "We found her car at a train station in Edinburgh," the detective said. "No sign of her. No credit card usage. No phone activity. She's a ghost." James stood behind Michael, arms crossed. She couldn't have done this alone. She didn't have the expertise to build that device. Someone recruited her, trained her, used her. "The question is who," the detective said, "and why." But Michael was thinking about something else. About the mark on the device, the crown. Sarah had worked at Balmoral for 6 years. She'd had access to security protocols. She'd known the royal family's schedules. If she'd wanted them dead, she could have made that device untraceable, could have left no clues, no warning, but she'd left that mark, that crown, that message. "She wasn't trying to kill them," Michael said slowly. "She was trying to warn them." James looked at him. "What?" "Think about it. A device that obvious, wires in plain view, a countdown long enough that we had time to work. And that mark." Michael stood up. "She was forced to plant the device, but she left them a way out." The detective frowned. "That's a hell of a theory. It's the only theory that makes sense." Michael grabbed the file. "Sarah Mitchell loved her job, loved the royal family. I saw her cry when Prince William got married. Real tears, real emotion. Someone got to her, threatened her, made her plant that device. But she couldn't do it without giving them a chance." "Even if you're right," James said quietly, "she's still guilty of attempted murder, of treason. The law doesn't care about her motivations." "But we should," Michael insisted. "Because whoever forced her to do this is still out there, and they'll try again." At Balmoral, life had returned to a strange kind of normal. Extra security, new protocols, bomb-sniffing dogs checking every room. But underneath the routine, everyone felt it. The knowledge that their sanctuary had been violated, that nowhere was truly safe. Charles sat in his study, looking out the same window he'd stood at 3 nights ago, the window that had made him a target. He was thinking about Sarah Mitchell, about the mark on the device, about the strange mathematics of loyalty and coercion. William knocked on the open door. "Can I come in?" Of course, William sat down in the chair across from his father. They'd talked more in the last 3 days than they had in months. Real conversations, not just protocol and schedules. "Security wants us to leave Balmoral," William said. "Move to a more secure location until they find everyone involved." "What do you think we should do?" Charles asked. William was surprised by the question. His father rarely asked his opinion on security matters. "I think we should stay." "Why?" "Because if we run, they win. Whoever did this wanted to make us afraid. Wanted to make us retreat? William leaned forward. But we're not just royals, Dad. We're symbols. And symbols don't hide. Charles smiled. A real smile. Your mother would have said the same thing. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then William said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "In that room, when you were choosing which wire to cut, were you scared?" Charles thought about lying, about maintaining the image of royal composure. But they'd been through too much for that. Terrified, he admitted. More scared than I've ever been in my life. Because showing it wouldn't have helped. You, Kate, your son, you needed me to be steady. So I was steady. Charles looked at his son. That's what we do, William. We carry the fear. We carry the doubt. We carry all of it so others don't have to. William understood. He'd felt the same weight, the same responsibility. Does it ever get easier? No, Charles said honestly. But you get stronger. Outside, James was briefing the security team. We're treating this as an ongoing threat. Whoever organized this has resources, has inside knowledge, and they clearly have a specific target. The royal family, one guard said. Not just the royal family. James pulled up a map. Think about the timing. Prince Charles and Prince William in the same location, both in line to the throne. If that device had worked, it would have disrupted the succession, created chaos, uncertainty. Thompson understood. Someone's trying to destabilize the monarchy. Exactly. And Sarah Mitchell was just the first move.
How?
James looked at his team. We need to find her. Not to arrest her, to protect her. Because if she left that mark to help them, then her employers know she'd betrayed them, and they will kill her for it. But Sarah Mitchell was already far beyond their reach. She sat in a small apartment in Brussels, hands shaking as she watched the news report. The royal family had survived. Her mark had worked. They'd cut the right wire. Relief flooded through her. Then terror. Because her phone was ringing, and she knew who it would be. You failed, the voice said when she answered. Cold, emotionless. I did exactly what you asked, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. We asked you to ensure they didn't survive. They survived. The device malfunctioned. I couldn't control. You left them a clue. We know. We've seen the photographs. Pause. You have 48 hours to fix this, or we release the evidence that will destroy your family. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the darkness, tears running down her face. She'd tried to save the royals, and she had, but now she had to choose. Her family or theirs. Her life or theirs. 48 hours? Back at Balmoral, Charles stood at his window again. He'd made a decision. James, he said into his phone, I want to make a statement public about what happened. Sir, with respect, that's not advisable. It could let whoever did this know that we're not afraid, that we're not hiding, that we're still here. Charles's voice was firm, and it might convince anyone else who was coerced into helping them that there's another way. James understood. The statement wasn't for the public. It was for Sarah Mitchell, wherever she was. 2 days later, Charles stood before cameras in the Balmoral Gardens. William stood beside him, united, strong.
How?
Recently, there was a security incident at this residence, Charles began. Details will remain private. But I want to say this. To anyone who feels trapped by threats against them or their families, know that there is always another choice, always another way. We do not abandon those who come to us for help. He paused, looking directly into the camera. And to those who believe that fear is power, understand this. We have faced danger before. We will face it again. But we will never let it define us. We will never let it win, William added. My father and I stand here today, together. It's proof that no threat will divide this family or this institution. We are united, and we will remain so. In Brussels, Sarah watched the broadcast. She heard the message underneath the words. The offer. The lifeline. She picked up her phone. Not the one her blackmailers had given her. Her own phone. The one she'd been too afraid to use. She dialed a number. Her hands shook, but she pressed call anyway. "Royal Protection Command," the voice answered. Sarah took a breath. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I need to come home." Within 6 hours, she was on a secure flight back to London. Within 12 hours, she was telling investigators everything: names, organizations, plans that went beyond just Balmoral, threats that reached into the highest levels of European security. She'd made her choice, and in making it, she'd saved more lives than just those in that safe room. James met her at the airport. "You left the mark," he said. Not a question. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't let them die. Even if it meant you chose right over easy," James said. "That takes courage." 2 weeks later, Charles and William walked the grounds of Balmoral together. The investigation was ongoing. Arrests were being made across 3 countries, but the immediate danger had passed. "We make a good team," William said. Charles smiled. "We always did. We just forgot for a while." They walked in silence, father and son, through gardens that had seen centuries of royals, through grounds where history had been made and unmade and made again. "Do you think about how close it was?" William asked. "How easily it could have gone the other way?" "Every day," Charles admitted. "But I also think about what it taught us, that we're stronger together. That trust matters. That sometimes the people who seem most ordinary are the real heroes." He was thinking of Sarah Mitchell, of her courage, of her impossible choice, and I think Charles continued that when danger threatens, when everything seems lost, the measure of who we are is in the choices we make. Not the easy choices, the hard ones. William looked at his father with new eyes, seeing not just the future king, but the man. The human being who'd faced death and chosen to save his family, who'd trusted a mark on a device and been right. "Thank you," William said, "for that night. For being brave when I couldn't be." "You were brave," Charles said. "You stood with me. You helped me think. You were exactly what I needed." Put a hand on his son's shoulder. "And one day, when your king and your own son faces something impossible, you'll remember that night. And you'll know that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it." They reached the spot where the intruders had stood in the woods. Where it had all begun, the trees stood peaceful now, silent witnesses to what had been and what might have been. "The guards," William said. "They were ready to die for us." "They were," Charles agreed. "And we will never forget that. We will never take it for granted, because that's what real leadership was. Not just wearing the crown, not just standing in the photographs and waving at crowds, but remembering that people put their lives on the line. That loyalty is earned through respect. That duty flows both ways." The sun was setting over Balmoral, golden light through ancient trees, the same light that had shone on monarchs for generations, the same light that would shine long after Charles and William were gone, but tonight they stood in it together. Father and son, king and heir, 2 men who'd faced danger and emerged stronger, not unchanged, but united. And somewhere in London, in a safe house, Sarah Mitchell watched the sunset too, knowing that she'd made the right choice, that sometimes betraying orders is the only way to remain loyal to what truly matters. That courage comes in many forms, and heroes don't always wear crowns. Sometimes they're just ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things when everything is on the line. The story of that night would remain classified. The public would never know how close they'd come to losing their future kings, but those who were there would carry it forever. A reminder that in the darkest moments, in the most impossible choices, humanity shines through, and that's what saves us. Not protocols or procedures, not steel doors or security systems, but the simple, profound choice to do what's right, even when it costs everything. Especially then.